Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live today.
Hello, Nikki. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Matt?
Good. You have a good Thanksgiving?
I did. It was quiet, but good. Family
Good.
around. And how about you?
Yeah, wonderful. Great to be with family, play a little snow football with the
Yeah.
kiddos. It's fun.
Oh, fun. Yeah. Gotta love the snow.
Yep, exactly. Well, let's introduce ourselves. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Nikki.
My name's Nikki Schmutz. I'm Director of Operations at Full Circle Aftercare. I've been here about 5 years, and I absolutely found my passion in life helping families through one of the hardest times when they lose their loved one. I myself have been through loss and find it highly rewarding to help others.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Nikki's a huge part of the identity of who we are. So my name's Matt Van Drimmelen. I'm the owner and founder of Full Circle Aftercare, and this is SBA Live. So we talk about topics that have to deal with what families have to deal with, what funeral homes, hospices, and law firms have to deal with in helping families through those next steps after the loss of a loved one. And so service-based aftercare is a way for those types of businesses to continue to help those families with kind of those next steps. And so we do this about twice a month and kind of just talk about some issues. And I think today's topic is going to be really good. You want to introduce it today?
Sure, yeah. Today are estate issues families often miss. So this is something we run across a lot where families just don't know what they don't know, right?
Right, exactly.
So if families haven't ever been through the loss of a loved one, it's a very new kind of procedure, the process of taking care of things. There are a lot of things that can be missed. And when families haven't been through that, they just don't know what they don't know. And so they don't know how to prioritize those estate issues or identify the correct order to do things so that they don't create missteps and cause bigger problems for themselves.
Yeah, it can be such an overwhelming experience. You know, you don't think about this side of it. You think about the grief, you think about losing a loved one, but then having to deal with everything that person's life touched is so hard. We moved about a year and a half ago, and I thought about the move, I thought about the new home, I thought about the packing up boxes, but I didn't think about notifying everyone about my address change. And I just ordered some stuff for Christmas, and it ended up going to our old house a
Oh
year and a half
no.
later because on this one app it hadn't been updated, right? And obviously I use that app a lot or don't.
Every Christmas.
so so it just goes to show, like, you think you know what to do, and then you don't expect all those next steps. And exactly what you said, they don't know what they don't know. And so thinking about the death, but then realizing there's a whole lot that has to happen next can be very overwhelming for families and a big emotional burden.
Yes, and another component of that is even people who are very organized, very like they're anticipating all of the steps. A lot of times we hear those families say, I didn't understand how hard it would be to do all the steps I needed to do because of the grief that they're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So today we're going to kind of go over some of those things that families can accidentally do wrong or pass over and not even take care of correctly, so that we can just kind of alert everyone as to what those things are. So, and our first topic always Social Security, because everyone is afraid of Social Security.
Yeah, everyone, that's the number one question they have,
Yes.
right? Is Social Security.
Yeah, and while Social Security does get notified when a person passes, there are electronic death registry systems in place in every state. When a doctor signs a death certificate, it puts that in there and it notifies Social Security as well. But that doesn't do anything for a surviving family member's benefits.
Yeah, and this is one criticism I have of my great friends in the funeral industry, because oftentimes they're taught at mortuary school, you need to tell the family, don't worry about Social Security, we'll take care of it for you. And that's not true. It is to an extent, like Social Security does get notified, but it misses a lot of those next steps. So something that we quote often here is that several years ago, they did a sample audit of survivors who had lost a spouse, and so they were sample audit of Social Security, and they found that only 18% of those survivors were receiving their full benefits. The other 82 were receiving no benefits at all, or maybe a partial payment of some sort, but they hadn't applied for it correctly. And a big part of that is they theorized, I think families just don't understand that they have to go through these next steps. Social Security doesn't keep track of who's married to who and who, all those different things. So when you want to apply for those benefits, you have to apply directly with them.
Yeah, I think people are under the idea that spouses are automatically linked in Social Security records, and they're not. So if the only times they are is if a spouse is already drawing from their current spouse's retirement because they
Right.
didn't work enough quarters. Like that's the only time that they're connected.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of confusion. Well, what about the 255 payment? Does a child get that? They don't. Right?
Yeah, and people still refer to it as the payment that helps to pay for the funeral,
Yeah,
which
or the
also
burial
is secret.
benefit, and yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the other thing that I did a training this year with a client up in Maine, and at the end of this training, one of the gentlemen was like, "I have been in the funeral service for 35 years. I don't know how many families I've helped. This is the first time I didn't realize that Social Security doesn't always." He was always taught Social Security will pay that a payment, and you don't get that payment, it gets back. They'll pull it back. He goes, I didn't realize sometimes that families do that last payment.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. And because I explained to him that oftentimes that payment's pulled back, but if they live the entire month previous, they should be claiming that payment through Form 1721, Social Security. And that right there, that's a huge payment. I mean, that could be $2,000-$3,000
Yes.
that they're due that last payment. They'll never receive if they don't go through that claiming process.
Yes, and through all the years of us working with Social Security, we have found that that is actually a legal procedural thing they do because they cannot issue a check to the name of someone who's already deceased. So that
Right.
is a process they have to go through to claim that last payment.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes around Social Security that families are missing benefits. They're missing payments. And you think about, for those of you in the death care industry, how many widows have you helped? How many people have you helped and been and their maybe sole source of income for the rest of their life is being underpaid because they didn't understand how Social Security benefits worked. And this is such a big piece.
Absolutely. And even family members who are still alive, if they don't take their benefits by a certain age, they can get less of a payment for it. It can go badly if they don't understand and clarify what the next steps are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So our next slide, bank accounts.
Oh, yeah.
Families have issues with bank accounts. A lot of families will notify the bank too early, which can cause problems. Or the bank, the bigger they are, the more they actually look for notices of passings, and they will freeze accounts right off the bat. So the bigger your bank, the more that happens.
Yeah, this is why it's critical. First thing, don't go directly to the bank. Like, don't let them know. Don't help them out in making your life difficult, right? Sometimes people feel like somehow the money's less secure if a person's passed away.
Yeah.
The money's just as secure as it was when they were alive, right? So fraud can happen on both sides, but typically within the bank, it's just as secure. So you don't have to go notify the bank if things aren't set up correctly. If they are set up correctly, then all of this problems goes away, whether it's a big bank who's going to go searching out for those records or a small bank or credit union who's going to work with you. It's just better to have things set up beforehand, a payable upon death situation. Adding people to an account is not always what I suggest, depending on what their specific situation is. And we're probably not going to get to that level of detail here, but you should talk to someone beforehand to make sure your bank accounts are set up right. Even going to the bank or credit union themselves and saying, what do I need to do here so that my wife can still pay her bills if I should pass away, or still have access to those funds? And they will help you with that.
Absolutely. And I know that nowadays, more than ever, when you go set up a bank account, they want you to list that person who it would be payable upon death, the beneficiary. But the older the account is, the more risk there is that there is nothing listed there. So it's very important to make sure that that has been updated.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, joint accounts for spouses are important, right? But even joint accounts will get frozen if it's not set up correctly, right? And so you don't want to do that. You don't want to have a frozen bank account and you can't pay your bills.
Yes, and the larger the bank, they're going to freeze it and they're going to wait to see the copy of the death certificate. So if there is any holdup on that death certificate, even if you are a signer on the account, a joint account person, they'll still, until they have that death certificate, they won't do anything. And that can be weeks.
Yeah, that's right. Death certificates are not immediate.
No.
So what I often suggest is make sure you have another account that you have access to that you can use to pay bills in an emergency situation. And just, make sure that you're having everything set up in the correct way is really, really important.
Yes. And one of the other things that can happen is the bank account can be frozen. There might be utility bills or other auto payment bills that are coming through that are going to get declined. That can cause havoc in someone's life with all of those automatic payments.
Yep, exactly. So in order to get it unfrozen, there's a couple things that need to happen. You're going to have a death certificate. If you're going through probate, once probate is triggered, everything goes through probate, right?
Yeah.
But what about for the families who they don't have millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars? They have $700 in an account that they need to close out. What do? Well, luckily, all the states individually have created an affidavit of small estate. And these small estate affidavits, what they can do is they basically circumvent probate. It basically is probate for something that doesn't need to go through the courts. And it's a form you fill out and it says, hey, here's all the assets. You have to list all the assets. Some people will be like, well, if I list all the assets, it goes over the limit. And so can I just list those ones? I'm like, well, it's a legal form and you probably don't want to lie on legal forms, right?
Well, and then they have to go through probate anyway when they realize they've left something off that pushes them over that limit.
Yeah, exactly. So just do things the right way. But if you are below that limit and you can do that, taking an affidavit of small estate will allow the bank to release those forms.
Yes.
Or at least those funds, excuse me, to you.
And those, for anyone watching, can be found on a website like forms.com. They have them for every single state. They have instructions on how to file it with the county. It is something that an everyday person can do. And if it's too confusing, it's always good to talk to an attorney.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Having a bank account in an LLC or a business is also another way to circumvent. If you do own a business or you do have something under an LLC or in a trust, right? The bank will often not close out or freeze those trust accounts. Yeah. So I had a situation where my wife, who teaches ballet, the ballet studio owner, lost her husband, and Marquesa was like, "Will you call her and help her with the closing of Spencer's affairs?" And so I said, absolutely. So I called her and I was like, "Clyde, I don't know if you know what I do, but I'm happy to help." And she goes, "Oh, I would really appreciate it. I'm just at the bank. I'm next in line. Let me call you back afterwards." And I was like, "Clyde, turn around, walk out the door." And she's like, what's going on? I'm like, "Just turn around." And I was like, "Were you going to tell them about Spencer passing?" She's like, "Yeah." And I knew that death certificate was going to be delayed, right? There were going to be a lot of problems. And I was like, he's on everything. And you run your business out of that account. You won't be able to make payroll. You won't be able to pay your utility bills. You won't be able to deposit checks coming in for this business. And it was going to be a nightmare. And so luckily we got everything in order first. And then we went in, transferred it, got his name off the accounts, and she didn't skip one beat with it. But there's a proper way and order of doing these things.
Absolutely. And I'm going to shout out to George, who sent us a message. He said, "Sorry I'm late. Was waiting to get into a Google Meet before I saw your YouTube link." So George, we're happy you found us.
Oh yeah. Thanks, George.
Yes. We just mentioned utilities in reference to the bank of them maybe not getting paid, but utilities themselves are their own issue, especially if it's an account your mom and dad have had for the last 50 years. I would say more than half of the time it is only in one of the spouse's names and not both, the older the account is. And that can be a problem when your mom calls after your dad passes away because there's a problem on the utility and no one will talk to her because her name is not on the account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so our company was born from funeral homes who used to do this. What they actually had is they had their pre-need agent do this. And so that was where the original training and idea came from, like, well, maybe a pre-need agent who's trying to sell something and they're trying to earn a commission isn't the best person to serve families. But from that original training, I remember the training used to say, don't help them with utilities. As long as utilities are getting paid, it's not a problem. And that's true to some extent.
Yeah.
But the moment there's a problem, the moment something needs to change, they're only going to talk to the person who's on that account, right?
Yep.
And so better to get ahead of it. The only time I would say you don't need to change over utilities is in a case when you know that that property is selling or being abandoned, right? So if it's like an apartment or something like that, and you have 2 weeks to get out, you don't need to go through the hassle of changing over utilities names before you leave, right? Same thing if you're listing that property immediately and you're just selling it, don't go through the hassle because it is a hassle working with those utility companies. However, if you might not sell it for another 2 years, then yeah, go ahead and change it over, right? They're getting better and better. Some are still awful, but most companies are getting better and better, and they just understand that we got to change this new person, new name. They'll need a new bank account number or the same one, but they'll need authorization that your name's on there. And so it's a process, but they're typically helpful, albeit slow.
Yes. And a lot of times there will be the remaining spouse or a family member has to open a new account. They have to pay security deposits. They have to go through all of that rigmarole just to move it over at all. I would say that another problem we've seen is if it's going to be sitting for over, a couple of months because they're planning on selling it or whatever, you need to look at your homeowner's policy.
Yes.
Because there are things in homeowner policies that says if it is sitting empty for 2 months or more, that it can affect your coverage. And if you turn off certain utilities and leave them off in an extended period, it can affect your insurance.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
And that could be very bad if something awful happened.
It could be very, very bad, right? So yeah, if you don't properly winterize it and you turn off the gas and it freezes and then you go to sell it and all those pipes are broken, you're going to be on the hook for that, right? And you're right, the insurance policy might not cover it if they haven't been notified.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not what you want to do, but all the utilities need to be notified. And if you have an estate specialist, then they can help you with those notification processes and making those phone calls and getting the right paperwork to you as well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Subscriptions are something we have a lot of families ask us about, everywhere from paid subscriptions to all of the charity mailers that mom donated to, that you get all the stickers and tote bags and all of those things. Those are super hard to cancel, almost impossible, but there is a lot of subscriptions that we can easily help cancel or point in the right direction. It can help stop all the mailings coming to the address. And especially if you're forwarding mail, you don't need all of the junk mail forwarded. It's not only a pain, but also could be some fraud risk as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things on subscriptions. Your friend, first of all, look at, if you have a bank account statement, you're going to see monthly subscription payments coming out of it, right? And so you'll know all those people need to be notified to cancel. The good news is most companies will let people out of contracts if it's someone who passed away. And if they don't, they're scum. And there are a few scummy companies out there who don't want to let you out of everything from especially the home security companies. Man, those guys are awful. Yes. They do not want to let people go. which is too bad. But so yeah, if you see money coming out of that bank account, if you don't know that, I think the greatest thing ever is if anyone's using a Chrome browser, most of the passwords are going to be saved in there. And so as you can go from subscription to subscription, if you can get onto their browser, find those passwords, you'll be able to log in and cancel those accounts. And oftentimes you can just cancel without having to like send in a death certificate or whatever, unless you're locked into a longer term contract, which in that case, you will have to send in a death certificate to cancel those.
Yeah, a few years ago, I personally helped a family and they were really, really upset about all the magazine subscriptions that were coming to the house. And
Yeah.
we found that their mom had had 30 subscriptions at least to all kinds of magazines, but they didn't want to read them for some reason. It really triggered the grief response of, I don't even want these coming to the house. I don't want to see them. I don't want to have to go through them or throw them away. And so I took the time to cancel every single one that I could find online because it was such a triggering thing for that family. And I think I did magazines more than anything else for them when we did that phone call. But it was something that they really needed for their own peace of mind.
Yeah. We do a lot of things to get rid of that junk mail coming in. And subscriptions, oftentimes trigger a lot of junk mail coming in. And those junk mail pieces are so triggering.
Yeah.
Something about going, I remember one time talking to a group of elderly people, and this widow said, my husband passed away 8 years ago, and I still, every time I go to the mailbox, my heart sinks, and I feel this dread of, oh no, is there going to be something else for Doug? Right? Doug's dead, and every time I go to the mailbox and she sees that letter with Doug's name on it, it is hurtful and just debilitating in her grief. And so, getting rid of those things are so important.
Yes, and I'm going to flip to the membership screen because we all know the AARP, they send so much mail, literally truckloads that they print 12 weeks in advance. And
Right.
AAA is another one. But these two in particular have ways to notify that someone has passed so that they can put a stop on all of that mail. And if it's a joint account, you can remove the one name from that account so that the mail comes only in the surviving family member's name.
Yeah. And I will say this for both subscriptions and memberships, a lot of companies don't do that. They don't allow you to remove one of the names, especially if it's like it was originally in Doug's name and now Wendy wants to stay on. They don't do it. And it's just too bad if they do that. But I do appreciate AARP. AARP also triggers a lot of other junk mail, a lot of other, solicitations. And so canceling that membership is good and something that absolutely should be done.
And one thing we get a lot of misunderstanding about, there is a Medicare supplemental program through AARP for medical coverage that is separate from the membership and all the mail that comes to a house. So you can notify to stop all the mailing, and it does not affect any medical coverage at all.
No, not at all. Yeah. So one thing when I talk about these types of things, if you can get into their internet browser, right? If you can open up Chrome, it should have saved passwords, or if they used another password saving thing and just do manage passwords, and you go through and every single thing they logged on probably needs to be canceled, right? Whether it's a membership or a subscription. Same thing with bank accounts. Just look at recurring charges. All those things need to be notified. And then sometimes phones will have apps. If you can get into their phone, getting in and seeing which apps they have, those are oftentimes will be paid or linked to subscriptions. And so making sure that all of those are notified, maybe not Candy Crush, but all the other stuff.
Yes, we have a whole estate sitting in our phones. Like we use
That's
our
right.
phones like a personal computer. There are issues with some brands of phones trying to get in if you don't know the password. If you can guess it, it's highly likely that you might be able to for your loved one. Get in there and you'll have access to the things you need. But for anyone out listening, you can go to your phone and set up a legacy contact. In iPhones, they have a process. In the Samsung phones, they have a process. So I know there's a process in all of those where you can have a person designated to be able to have access to that after your passing.
If you have set up a legacy contact, especially with Apple, it's a great thing to have, to be able to get into that phone, not only for the photos and the accounts, but also for all that personal information that will help you know what to do, right? We started this whole thing about you don't know what you don't know. And being able to get into the phone is going to be a huge step forward. Everything from email to bank accounts to passwords, it's all in there. And the photos and things like that. But if you haven't set up a legacy contact, it is dang near impossible to get into, especially an Apple device. And so take the time, set up a legacy contact, give someone that you trust your PIN to your phone, right? Because oftentimes it's fingerprint or it's face, but there's usually a PIN, another way to get in secondarily. Giving people access that way is so important, and setting up that legacy is big.
Especially for the people who pass away when they're younger. They're everything they have is on that phone. It's so important to at least have that written down somewhere so that your family can access that. We
Yep.
have had so many families who lose a younger loved one in a car accident or any kind of scenario, but then nobody can get their phone open. And
Yep.
most people think, oh, there has to be a way, but like Apple, they literally require a court order. That's not letters of testamentary from probate. It is a court order to be able to have access.
And very few judges will do it.
Yeah.
Yep. Because it's a whole separate process, right? Being able to get before a judge and get before one that will do it is hard, right? So that's why it's pretty difficult to get it done. The good news is with some of these, even if the phone's destroyed, so much of it's in the cloud. And so if you are a legacy contact, you can still access a lot of that information.
Absolutely. And the same thing goes for emails. So if you have a saved login, you can get in there and kind of monitor email. Email is a great way to find receipts or payments that are coming in or going out. It's a great way to be able to respond to even other people who are emailing your loved one if needed, and figure out anything that needs to be wrapped up. If you don't have access to that, it's a little bit easier, like through Gmail, to get access for that, but it's still going to require some paperwork to prove that you are the person in charge of the estate.
Right. Exactly. And you would think that you just let it go, but don't, right? Because there is so much information. If someone hacks that years down the road, and it will be, right? Eventually, at some point, 2.5 million deceased individuals get their identity stolen every year, right?
Yep.
And so people are looking for deceased individuals to access their information. So being able to shut that off is going to save you a lot of headache down the road, and kind of better protect the memory of your loved one.
Absolutely. And if you want to keep it around for a while, that's fine. But I would recommend that you log in more than once a year if you're keeping it around for other reasons, to make sure that there isn't any fraud going on or someone has broken in and they're sending their own stuff from that email.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a lot of information in emails.
Yes, absolutely.
Email also, once you get in, is a good place to look for subscriptions, people coming, what's coming into that email, what's automatic. Check the junk folder or the subscriptions folder, because of the updates folder, depending on which one it is. And oftentimes that will tell you what accounts they had.
Absolutely. And it'll also help with social media. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they all have ways for families to memorialize accounts and to designate someone to be in charge if you were to pass away. You can do that in all of those platforms. Pinterest doesn't have as good of a program, but they will deactivate if you send them a death certificate. So, and then TikTok is really big in the younger generation. They don't have a great process. They can only be deactivated if you have the login information. Otherwise, it just sits there forever. So
Right. And I think especially the Facebook and Instagram thing, it's nice when you memorialize those, right? It still allows people to come on and comment at their birthday and, those types of things. It gives you access to those. But yeah, so they have options that it's not an easy process. So it is a process. And if it's someone who didn't use those social media accounts very often, if you can get in to delete those accounts, at least that's going to be the easiest thing to do.
Yes.
Right. Once again, that's probably going to be saved in on the phone, a login there, or saved in like a browser, depending on the age of the person. But yeah, get rid of those accounts, delete them. If they didn't use it very often, if they did, if they're pretty active on social media, that's probably when you want to go through that process of memorializing. It is a process, though. It is not like turning a switch, right? So you're going to be several months of going back and forth, getting the right documentation to them, filling out forms before they'll do that for you.
That's why it's important to do it now before you pass away, so that your family who's left can take care of it. I'm actually the person in charge of a memorialized account on Facebook, and because I was already listed there, I always had full access. So all I had to do was show the death certificate, and years later, there's still people commenting. I can still manage the whole profile like it was my own, which is very nice.
That is so nice. That is so nice. Yep. So if you can set it up beforehand, super helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And we have Lily. She says, this is super informative. And she put the little emoji with the really big eyes, because there's a lot of things here people don't realize.
It feels like a lot. The sad thing is what I say is, you don't know what you don't know. But then once you find out, now it feels overwhelming.
Yes.
So some people would rather ignorance is bliss. But as you start going through that, that's why I think it's important to have a live person help you through this. You can look at checklists all day. You can Google them. There's a lot of people that charge you a lot of money to tell you what to do. And all that information is free online. But going to the next level of having an expert who's willing to talk to you through this and make those notifications and kind of protect you emotionally as you go through this process, that is just worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that we don't have a slide on is crypto.
Oh, yeah.
Cryptocurrency. So it's the one asset. There is no way to pass crypto, right? So if you don't give someone your information, right, your pin is it? I think it's called a pin. I manage mine through a different app, but either the app that you manage it through, or if you're doing it directly like Bitcoin and you have, the account number or the PIN number, if you don't have that, no court in the world can order that it gets turned over to you, and anyone will do it, right? And so just so you know, like crypto, 100%, you have to have that in a place where people can get to at some point. And I know some people don't want to do it, but if you die, it dies with you. It's not going to pass to your heirs.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of debate whether crypto should be monitored on the federal level, like all other investment things are. And
Right.
As of now, it is not.
Yeah. And I don't think it's likely to be in the near future.
Yeah.
So
it becomes like a big black hole.
Yeah, big black hole. So that's one of those assets. Most other assets, real estate, retirement accounts, bank accounts, all those things we didn't really talk to, but yeah, you have to go through the process of probate. You can get a judge. They'll give you the documentation to transfer it to your name. But that's one asset that won't, right? And so just thinking about the apps on the phone, the social media, those types of things, if they're managing it through an app on the phone, oftentimes you can access at that point. Just make sure you're above board on that, right? So if there's multiple heirs, it does need to go to all the heirs and not just one. There's some more, intense issues with this.
Yes, absolutely. And it could cause family drama. If the family knows it's there, or they know certain things are there, if they know bank accounts are there, but they don't realize one person was put on as a joint out of all of the heirs and others weren't, there are so many things that kind of bypass some of that process, because if there's a beneficiary listed, it bypasses any of the probate and just goes right to the beneficiary.
Right.
There's a lot of things that really have to be monitored and taken care of. They recommend always sitting down with your family with your final plans in place and let them know what to expect, because even that is helpful. It's a hard conversation, but it is helpful so that your family knows what to expect in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So
absolutely,
just having that information written down, access to a trusted family member is so important.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Yep.
We open up for some questions if any questions come in. I haven't dealt a lot with crypto with a lot of our families because I think it's the boomer generation and their parents that are still the ones that are passing away more regularly. But as the years progress, as that changes, we're going to be facing these things more and more, and it's important to have those plans in place.
Well, and I will say we don't deal a lot with crypto because most family members have no idea if their loved one had it.
Yeah.
Right. And there's literally nothing we can do if they don't have, even if they know they have it, if they don't have access to that information, they're not getting it. So
Yep.
yeah, it's something we can't help you with if you didn't give a little bit of a plan beforehand.
Yep.
So we don't deal with that very often. But yeah, getting into the phone is key. Getting into the desktop or their computer is key. If they haven't used any of that for years, that's probably a good thing because most of those things are probably lapsed. But definitely check the bank account and see what money's coming out, and credit card statements, those types of things.
Definitely. And I have had a lot of families let me know that it feels strange and it feels weird to go through their loved ones' things and their loved ones' accounts. And it feels like prying because they have to kind of get in. A lot of people, you find things you didn't know were there, sometimes bad, but usually just informative, the things you need to take care of. But it can be very hard on families to have to feel that way and have to dig through things and have to find all of the things that need to be taken care of. But it's okay. It's actually the responsibility of the family to take care of those things. So,
Right. And sometimes I talked to a grief therapist and said sometimes people want to avoid doing these next steps, not only because it feels overwhelming, but also because it almost like there's something left undone, which means it's not finalized yet.
yeah.
And it's a weird thing of, the psyche that I don't quite understand. But when things aren't finalized, it feels like I don't have to grieve yet. Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, what he said is helping people get through those next steps is hard. But when they're through it, it's actually more healing for them. They actually approach grief in a more healthy manner when they don't have these other things that they have to take care of next. And so it is important, not only from a physical standpoint of making sure things are done, but from an emotional and a mental health standpoint. Mental health, when you don't deal with grief correctly, it can cause a lot of problems down the road.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we have another question, Aaron. What should funeral homes do to support families with these issues?
Yeah. So I would say you probably need someone on staff who becomes an expert in all this, and they can meet with families individually. If you don't have the resources to do that, then use a company like Full Circle Aftercare. We can do that for even small companies where it's completely white labeled under you, and they have a person. You have a person that's going to meet with each and every family, helping them with all those next steps to their comfort level, and maybe push them a little bit to make sure that everything does get wrapped up and they get all their benefits, and which is huge. I can't tell you when funeral homes, when families get that experience, they didn't expect the funeral home to do that next level. The feedback they give is just like, this is incredible. I never expected you guys to do this. And the loyalty goes up, the appreciation goes up. And that's exactly what you want to do for your community because you care about your community.
Absolutely. And I would say that there's a reason probate attorneys also use our service. It's because the things that we help with are not the legal matters. They are all of the other parts of the estate that are non-legal that really are important and they affect everything. And so as a funeral home, even if you know a family has an attorney, help with those aftercare items is still super important.
Yeah. I got another question here that says, why should families care about some of these smaller state issues, right? And why not just let them go? Great question. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people do let them go. And I think there's two pieces here. One is peace of mind, right? When I go and present at like assisted livings and stuff, I'll have this big crowd of people and I'll say, hey, who here's experienced the loss of a loved one? And all the hands go up. And then they say, who here had to close out your loved one's personal affairs? About half the hands stay up, half of them go down. And then I ask people, what was that experience like for you? Tell me what it was like. And everyone was like, oh, I loved it. It was the best experience ever. No, I'm just kidding. Right? Everyone says, it was awful. I didn't know what I was doing, or it wasn't too bad, you know. And then I always ask, how long did it take you? And I get a few answers. The average across the country for someone who has no assets, less than 10,000 of assets, the average family takes 18 months, 14 to 18 months to close those out. But that's not the answer I get. The answer I get is, I don't know. I don't know if we ever finished.
Yeah.
And that is mental health strain that you don't want to have lingering over you. It's that, did I leave the iron on? Did I close the garage to the door, or the door to the garage, you know, before I left? It's that for years later. And I've talked to widows, like, how long ago did your husband die? 11 years ago. And so for 11 years, you've had this nagging, aching, like, is there something left undone? Right. And even if they're minor issues, just making sure everything's tidied and cleaned up will give you mental health and peace of mind. And it will protect you from people coming in and using your loved one's name in fraud and taking advantage of assets and being overcharged. We had a family who called us up over a year later, and they're like, we think that there's a newspaper subscription. We didn't catch it, but we were just reviewing mom's bank account. And yeah, there's a charge for newspaper. The reason why they never caught it, there was never one newspaper delivered.
Uh-oh.
And they were like, what's going on? So they had just installed the security cameras, and they found the newspaper was being delivered every morning. And the moment it was delivered, the neighbor would walk over, grab the newspaper, and take it to their house. And so they had paid for their neighbor to have a newspaper subscription. I mean, not very many people do. You know, I was talking to the son. His son's like, I didn't even think about newspaper subscriptions anymore. But older generation, they still had one. Right. And so it's just those little things. You don't want to lose money. You definitely don't want to lose out on benefits. 82% of widows not being paid on their Social Security benefits. That's way too many.
That's
And
horrendous.
that's a tragic thing to have happen. So making sure that it's all done right and that you get your benefits and everything's closed out and you're protected from fraud will create peace of mind and create that healing journey.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome. We have a few announcements. So we're going to try and get some people on the show soon. But one, we just partnered to have a new grief care library that is free for everyone. And this care library is awesome. It has articles and videos and blogs and a million things from all these different contributors from around the country, 100% free. There's no login. There's nothing that's sold to the family. There's no ulterior motive here. It's just help with grief, right? They can share it with their friends. Any of our clients have access to that. And every single family we serve gets access to that. It even has free grief groups. And there's been a lot of studies that have come out that grief groups are the very most effective way to heal from grief. It's more effective than a therapist. It's more effective than doing it on your own or just waiting. Something about going with other people who are in your same situation and listening to them talk, it's healing. And so we have that super great announcement, and we're going to be doing a press release soon here, but every single one of our families will now have access to a free app that's called My Nimu. And so they won't have to pay a thing for it. And a little bit about back on my story, when my dad passed away, my brother goes down to my dad's house. He throws all my dad's stuff on this trailer, takes a picture, says, I'm hauling this to the dump unless anyone wants something.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And all of a sudden, everyone's texting back and forth. Well, I want this and I want this. And he's like, okay, you get that and you get this. And anyway, we were like, don't do anything yet. Right. And pretty soon people start fighting. Well, who put you in charge? well, why do you get to say who gets what, right? And all of a sudden, my family is about ready to kill each other. And we found my Nemu app. And what it does is it allows you just to take a picture of each item. All the errors go on. They say put an emotional score of how much they want, how much they feel like that means to them. And if you're looking for value, you can get an appraisal on it. And then it just distributes. And it's a fair, and you can see what everyone else got and what you got. And you're like, oh, guess what? My family, who fights a lot, 0 fights. So we're able to do a deal with MyNemu. Every single one of our families will have access to that for free. They'll be able to catalog and distribute. Now, if it's a very, very large estate and there's like multiple distributions, then they do have an upgraded tier, or the appraisals are included because they have to pay outside appraisers for that. But we're really excited for that. And we have a few other announcements that we're about to make probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks that are also exciting extra benefits for families that they won't have to pay for. So anyway, thanks, George. Appreciate the nice comments. Said great information as well. Anyway, when's our next meeting or next
our
podcast?
next live?
Yeah, that's
it's a podcast too. December 16th. We're going to do that at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And it's going to be why investing in aftercare pays off for funeral homes.
Awesome. Okay.
Yep, it's going to be good.
Specifically funeral homes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.